Hey everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the High Five Preschool and Kids Weekly Training Podcast. We're so excited that you're joining us today. I am here with my great friends Crystal and Isaac. Hey Crystal and Isaac, how's your week going this week?
Such a good week.
So good. It's so good. Such a good week. We're so optimistic, Isaac and I. We're both like, it's the best week ever. What makes it great? I don't know. It just is.
We're just happy to be here with
I'm
you,
so
Kayla.
glad. I love it. I love all of the positive energy that you bring to the podcast. You two are most certainly super positive and always looking for the fun and always excited about life. So
Pretty
listeners, I hope you are as excited about what's happening in your life as Crystal and Isaac are excited all the time. So this week, week 2 of April, we are looking at the story of Elijah and the prophets this week. In preschool, we are talking about how God helps me be brave. And then with the kids content, we're talking about how I can stand strong. And so we're really looking in, diving into this concept of how we are set apart by God and how God helps us to obey him. And so as we look at that, first question up is, when is a time that you conquered a fear? So we're talking about bravery, standing strong. And this week's story is all about really standing strong in your faith in the midst of fear. And so I just want to hear from you guys who are always full of joy and excitement. Have you ever been afraid in your life, ever? And if you have, what is a time that you've actually conquered a fear?
Yeah, so I did not know I was afraid of heights. But apparently I am
Oh,
because a couple years ago I was chaperoning a high school trip over to a camp, like summer camp. We were in Idaho, so lots of woods, and they had this giant ropes course, right? So you get put up in a harness and you go up on this ropes course, and I know, like mentally, I know they are completely safe, right? Like you're attached to things, you are not going to fall. However, I climbed up to the top, and there's all these places you could go. And as soon as I got to the top, I thought I was gonna die. And I will say we did have one student who climbed up to the top and right away just climbed back down. And I thought I was gonna have to be then the first adult that would do this, but I was like, no, I at least need to do the like zip line down. I was I don't know that I've ever been so scared in my life, but I did it. I got on, I didn't go anywhere else on the ropes course. I just went up, walked over to the zip line to get down, grabbed onto the thing. I went down, and I say I conquered the fear because I did it. But here's what I will say: never again. I will never, ever, ever do it again. I did it once. I feel like you can consider
Check it
that
off.
conquering, and it will never happen again.
that's amazing. Well, I'm glad that you conquered it. I'm glad that you
Yeah,
continued and you pushed
yeah,
through
I
and
did
you
one
conquered
time.
that fear.
One
That's
time.
amazing.
Yes.
Isaac, have you ever been afraid of anything?
So, heights is not something I'm afraid of. People are afraid of me around heights because I'm like, I should just jump off this. This seems like a great idea. But I
That
will
is
say
accurate.
my deepest fear is like deep water. Like I've been out on
Mm.
boats and like deep sea fishing and stuff like that. I grew up in Florida, so I was always around water, but I also, because I grew up so close to it, I knew what was in the water. So that feeling of like just
Mm.
looking down into deep water, like even right now, I kind of get the heebie-jeebies of it. But for actually my wife and I's honeymoon, we took a cruise down to like the Bahamas. And one of the things that for some reason we signed up for, this was bad hindsight, but we signed up for snorkeling, thinking it would be like, oh, nice little shallow water, see some cool
Yeah.
corals. See, no, they like took us to the drop off, and it picture Finding Nemo drop off, where you like look out and there's just this abyss of darkness out in front of you. And it took me a good long time to like, I got in the water and I had to like hold on to the boat for a second, but I eventually was able to like conquer my fear. I was able to swim down with some little
There you
fishes,
go.
and yeah, it was a great time, But again, like Crystal, I did it. I checked it off. I'm good.
Never again.
So I had to look it up because I was thinking it's called thalassophobia. That is the fear of vast, deep water.
Like to the point where when I look into the Shamu tank at SeaWorld, I like my knees get weak. Like that's where I'm at.
Okay, I don't know what that one is though, because that is not deep and dark. That's just a big pool.
No, it's huge. It's like you can't see the bottom of that thing.
Oh man, that's
Okay,
funny.
right.
It's so interesting that y'all's fears, my Southern is coming out, that your fears are like, Crystal, yours is like depth in one direction, and Isaac, yours is depth in the complete opposite direction.
Interesting.
It's very interesting to me. Very cool. Well, thank you guys for sharing about your deep fears and how you have conquered them. So, listeners, today, as we are looking at and preparing for this coming week of teaching kids from the story of Elijah and the prophets, this is 1 Kings chapter 18. And so this is it's kind of a cool story, especially for kids. Like there's fire that comes down from heaven. There's all kinds of really like interesting things that happen in the story. But Crystal, could you just kind of help us understand a little bit why this story, why this week, about why we're talking about Elijah and the prophets, and how does it connect to this idea of being set apart and standing strong in our faith?
Yeah, one of the things that we try really hard to do with Hi-Fi is include Bible stories that we would kind of call, like foundational, traditional, classic Bible stories, if you will. And this is one of those stories. And so, quick little recap of it. Elijah is a prophet in a time when people who are loving and following God are being persecuted by the king at that time, the king Ahab. And there comes this point when Elijah comes up against a bunch of prophets for a false god named Baal. And he says essentially to these false prophets, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a little contest, a little head-to-head contest. We're going to both build altars. You put a sacrifice on your altar, call out to your God. I'm going to put a sacrifice on my altar, call out to the true God. And whoever answers by fire is going to show that they are the true God. And so, the prophets of Baal, they're dancing, they're screaming, they're doing all this kinds of stuff. Nothing happens. Elijah has some really good, fun taunts that we don't really include in our Bible story. But listeners, if you want to read some good stuff, definitely open up to 1 Kings 18 and read about Elijah and his little, that's kind of what I picture in my head, nanny. Anyways, and then Elijah soaks his sacrifice in water and calls out to God, and God comes down in so much fire that it burns up his sacrifice, it burns up the water, and it's just this incredible, incredible show of power. Now, I'll say that oftentimes when we teach this story, that's really what we focus on is God's incredible show of power. Like he shows he is the one true God. And that is absolutely true. And we do point that out. But really with this story, what we kind of emphasize even more and that we want kids to see is that Elijah has this moment where he looks at the people that are standing around, because it's the prophets of Baal and it's other people who are gathered to see this showdown. And he looks at them and he says, you need to make a choice. Who are you going to believe? Who are you going to worship? Who are you going to follow? And really, when we think about these kids and the culture that they are growing up in, that's what we want them to know. That even when things seem scary, even when things seem hard, even when everybody around you believes something different or acts in a different way or whatever, you can be brave. You can stand strong and say, this is what I believe. What do you really believe? Let me tell you why I believe what I believe. Let me tell you why I love God, why I follow God, why I live the way that I live. And I am going to be brave and stand strong, even when it feels like I am the only person doing it. And then kids and preschoolers from this story can know that when they do that, God is so proud of them. When they do that, God is with them. He is supporting them. He is standing strong with them. And it's just a really cool, I would say, even take on this story of really getting to emphasize Elijah's response in that situation, even before God shows up in that mighty, powerful way.
Yeah, that's so cool. And I love how in this story, it really does emphasize that option, like, okay, like choose who you're going to serve. Like, are you going to stand on the side of the Lord or are you not? Like, there is a decisive decision that has to be made. And a lot of times, as we think about the kids and even the preschoolers to some extent that we serve, there's a lot of situations that this generation is facing that are really unique. That there are things that our generations didn't have to face, generations before us didn't have to face. Isaac, what are some of those things that, as we teach about helping kids be brave and to stand strong and to stand firm in their faith, how can we help them to stand strong? What are some of those unique situations that they face? And then how can we help them really stand strong and own their faith as their own?
For sure. I think that one of the biggest things is just the idea of standing apart is countercultural for what these kids are experiencing every single day. They're being told, like, hey, this is the identity you should have. Join this group, be a part of this thing. We won't accept you unless you are X, Y, and Z. But the amazing thing about God and his welcome, his love, the identity that he has given us is he says, no, come as you are and just follow me. Like, I want to love you as you are. So I think a lot of the things that Gen Alpha is facing as they follow God, as they listen to his word, as they stand apart, are these things of cultural identity of saying, hey, if you don't believe what we believe, you're going to be exercised. You're going to be cast out because you don't follow along to our said beliefs. For a lot of the younger kids, just being able to say, "Hey, God can help me know what's right." Well, so many people are saying, "Hey, what is truth? What is right? What is it that is the quote unquote right thing to do?" Well, when we follow God, He gives us that through His Word, through His Bible, and we can present that to these kids. And there's a reason that we call these the 12 truths. These are the 12 truths that each month we want kids to learn. So that way, when they are in those moments where they have to stand up, where they have to stand strong, where they have to stand apart, they have these truths in their back pocket. This is something that they know isn't just a truth that has come from the world. This isn't a truth that has come from someone who is just writing it because they think it's a good idea, but this is a truth that comes from God's word, and they can stand strong on that.
Yeah. You know, as you were talking, it made me think a lot of our older kids, and even maybe even some of the volunteers in our ministry, maybe some of the students, the college students that serve with our ministries and others, have really experienced this in tangible ways where, yes, we're being asked to like choose our own identity, choose who we are, and then to surround people around us who accept that identity, right? But there's also kind of a counter element to that where um, a lot of times it seems like in our culture we're being told, you know, you can choose that for you, just don't make me believe that.
Mm.
Don't make me like, and so there's this little bit of relativism that's still at play where to some extent, you know, we can say that you know, believe what you want to believe, just don't make me believe that. Don't you can believe that, and that can be okay for you, but I'm not going to believe that. And so helping kids really understand, like, no, this is true, these are things that are true for all people. God loves all people. All people have disobeyed God, and we need a rescuer, we need Jesus. And so I think that's an element too with kids, that just helping them realize and understand, like, this is going to be sacrificial, this is going to be hard. And we don't always, I don't know that we always present the gospel in that light sometimes, that, you know, there are going to be sacrifices. Jesus tells us to come as we are, but we don't stay as we are. And that can be really scary for some
Mm.
people who want to stay exactly as they are. and that, we are called to come and to surrender, but then also to follow. And so I just think it's really, really timely and really helpful for kids as we really dive into this truth about what does it mean to stand apart? What does it mean to really obey and follow God? And there are real sacrifices that our kids have to make, and real hard decisions that they will have to make, and consequences that they will have to live with as they choose to follow Jesus.
And I think one of my favorite things, like when I hear people talk about the Bible and how it's not relevant today, I kind of just laugh because I feel like a lot of the things that these kids are going through right now are the exact same things that Elijah was going through at this time. How he didn't align with the beliefs of that time. How he was saying, no, I'm going to stand on the truths of what God has told me to do, not what this king is telling me to do. And he was literally cast out for it. And when he went before the people, he said, hey, this is what God has told me. Do you stand with God or do you stand with Baal? And because he stood strong, because he stood apart, all of these people came and began to follow God because of his witness, not even just what he was doing, but what God did through him. And honestly, that should be our prayer for all of the kids that are going out to school each day, that are going out to their soccer teams, baseball teams, is that not only are they going to be a witness, but that God would use them as a witness to bring people to him.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Isaac. Absolutely. And it really kind of leads us into our next question is, as we're talking about being set apart and what that means, like, how does this development and understanding our position before God, our identity as set apart by God and for God, how does that lead us to bravery, to courage, to the ability to stand strong, to face our fears in the midst of really, really hard things?
Mm-hmm. Um, so it makes me think about something that's going to seem really silly, even though this is a serious question, right? I was out to dinner with a friend, somebody that we all know, that is part of the Lifeway team, and she dips her French fries in mustard. And I thought that was the weirdest thing in the world. I have never met anybody that dips French fries in mustard, like not honey mustard, regular mustard.
Mm.
And but she's like, she's proud of it, she's fine. But what it does is it makes me think about it's fine.
She's
She loves
proud of the
mustard.
mustard.
She's proud of her
She is
mustard.
proud of her mustard. She is proud of her love for mustard, and she will stand strong on the mustard hill. But what it does make me think about is how so many, I would say preschoolers, kids, but even adults can feel this fear of being different or standing strong in a way that other people don't like, in a way
Mm.
that makes them stand out for a bad reason, because people are like, I don't like that you believe that, I don't like that you do that. There's so many things about us that we will hide or we will keep secret, because we don't want people to know that I actually do like this thing, I actually do this. But when we remember that God created us to be different, God created us so that we wouldn't fit in, so we would stand apart, so we would stand out. The art for kids this month is, it's like a paper airplane that's flying in a different direction than all the rest of them. When we remember that, like, no, this actually, the fact that other people think it's different, the fact that it makes other people scratch their heads, like
Mm.
it helps us and it encourages us, because it makes us, like, we remember this is what it is supposed to be. I'm not supposed to live in a way that I match everybody else. I'm not supposed to live in a way that, nobody can tell the difference between me and this person and that person. I was made to stand out. I am made to be set apart so I can point other people to God, so I can bring him glory, so I can shout his name from the mountaintops. And so it's really recognizing that this difference is what it's supposed to be, essentially.
Yeah, that's
I love
great,
that.
Crystal.
Yeah, I mean, there's really not much I can add to that. That was so good. I do want to add, like, one of my favorite verses for a long time was 2 Corinthians 5:13. And it says, "For if we are out of our mind, it is for God. If we are in our right mind, it is for you. For the love of God compels us." And when I was a kids pastor, I actually signed my emails that way. If we're out of our mind, is for the glory of God. So that way, when I asked for something ridiculous from the lead pastor, he knew where I was coming from. But I really do think that there are times where the world's going to look at us and say, hey, they are out of their mind. There is something different about them. And you know what? That's not a bad thing. That's not a bad thing. One of my favorite conversations I ever had was a lady was cutting my hair, and I said, "Hey, I need it to go extra short. I'm about to go to camp for 2.5 months." And she's like, "Oh, what camp?" And I started talking to her, and she literally said, "You're crazy. You're crazy. I would never go work with kids for 3 months at camp." And I said, "Well, yes, I am crazy, but here's why." And I got to tell her why I wanted to teach kids about Jesus through that haircut. So it was just a really cool opportunity, but it was because she thought I was out of my mind that I got to share that with her. So it's going to lead to opportunities. Yes, it is uncomfortable for kids sometimes, but it is so cool when they get to experience that and and God gets to work through them.
I love that story. And I think too, just the idea of getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's really countercultural for us, even as adults, that we like to be comfortable. We don't really
Yeah.
want to be in situations where we're uncomfortable. And so as we teach this lesson this week about how we can stand strong, how we can stand apart, and we can be brave and make choices that obey God, even when they're hard or even when they're scary. I think it's really helpful and valuable that we help lead kids, just what you were saying, Crystal, that set apartness is helping us. Like, we are made for this so that we can point others to who God is. And that is our prayer for us as leaders, and for you and your ministries and for your kids, that you would be able to help kids understand that their set apartness, their being made different as part of a child of God, means that we get to point others to Him, and that's such a beautiful gift that the Lord gives us. Well, listeners, we are so thankful that you guys are joining into our podcast. We would love to hear from you and how your week is going, what's happening in your ministry. So be sure to check us out on the Facebook group. We would love to hear if there's ways that we can help you in your ministry. Next week, we're going to be looking at how I can stand patiently for kids and how God helps me follow His plan. So we're going to be looking at the story of how John prepared the way, and how we can follow God's plan and stand patiently as that plan is fulfilled in us. So we hope you guys have a great week. And until next time, we'll talk to you soon.